Yo, 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 DonknDave here, back on the road. Day 5 of the Take It Easy tour.
Take it easy, take it easy.
And last night I stayed in a KOA, which hopefully, if God wills it, it'll never happen again. I do not like the KOAs. They are way overpriced and they don't give you any benefits, so enough of that. Slept okay. First time tenting last night. That was good. Slept well. Did encounter a problem. The battery on my computer is not communicating with the computer, so it was not charging. So had a near panic attack with that. But I stopped at McDonald's, got some breakfast, started figuring it out. Figured out that I needed to turn the computer off, open up the back case, disconnect the battery cable that goes into the computer, turn it back on, turn it off, plug that cable back in, and then let the computer reboot to the battery, and it worked. So now my battery is charging and it's all good. So that was a little bit of a panic for me, but this is what it's like when you're on the road. You just have to figure things out. You know, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but you just have to try to figure things out on the road, and it works. So I'm happy with that. We'll see where we go now, and hopefully we won't get splatted by any cars or anything like that. I have to apologize to you guys about the video last night or this morning, because I had a great video going across the Chesapeake Bay Bridge and it sucked. The audio sucked. So I'll try to do better on that, guys. I apologize. So, alright, on to the next place. Alright, folks, this is Washington's home, Mount Vernon. We're going to check it out and see what we can see. Find out a little bit more about the man. He's pretty interesting. This is another close-up shot of the estate here at Mount Vernon. This is where Washington lived. He and Martha and Martha's kids. She was married, and then her husband died. She had a couple of kids by her first husband. They didn't have any kids. So, yeah, Washington, they didn't have any kids. They say that he got sterile after he caught chicken pox or some disease or something like that. They tried to have kids, they couldn't have them. So, yeah, Mount Vernon up close. We're going to see if we can take a tour. All right. This here is one of those hedgerows that they would have planted back in the day. This is meant to kind of copy the English gardens and the French gardens that they had back in the day, because Washington took a lot from the English and the British way of life. His estate was planned kind of on how the British estates were. So, pretty neat. He spent some money on this stuff, didn't he? Alright, here's one of the storehouses, and this is original to the estate. And you can see the beams up there. They look like they're like 4 by 10s up there. And they're all made of, looks like oak. I got oak beams in my house too. I wonder if my house will last that long. But this is all original to the estate. And they stored all kinds of stuff in here. Food, clothes, all kinds of crazy stuff. Whatever they needed back then. And Washington had a guy that would manage his estate for him, so he didn't have to worry about it too much. Alright. Alright, folks. This is the gardener's house. And this is where the guy who ran Washington's plantation estate ran the garden. And this is where he stayed. This is where he lived. Washington didn't take care of everything himself. He hired good people to manage his estate for him while he was doing other things. That's a good manager. That's a good CEO. And he was a good one. He made a lot of money doing his stuff. So yeah, he had a gardener. Washington also was one of the people that originated selective breeding. So what he did is he took the very best of his sheep that made wool and he bred them with the rams that made the best wool. So he practiced selective breeding. We do that now today. And apparently this is the spinning room where they would make their thread. You can see there's a loom right there and there's a spinning wheel. And they do stuff that I can't explain how they do it, but they do it. They make their wool. God, can you imagine how hot that was back then? But that's what they did. Pretty cool. What would an estate be without having somebody that can fix things and make things? So here's the room here. This is the blacksmith room. And Washington had his own blacksmith to do work for him and make plows and tools and all kinds of gadgets. Because Washington wasn't going to do that himself. He hired somebody to do it for him. Smart man. But yeah, the blacksmith will be here at 12:30 and I'm a little bit early for that, so we'll see. Alright, the blacksmith room. And again, this is another room that is original. This building here is original to the property. Some of those pieces of wood up there have been replaced, but the majority of them are original to the house. Pretty interesting. Alright, here's a tree. Circa 1785. So that was originally planted here, and it's a big tree. Wow. Alright, this is the servants' quarters where the people that served Washington inside, they lived. And as you can see, it's just a plain building with whitewashed walls. Very plain. But hey, they're in a nice warm place. That's good. Alright, this here is a view from the back porch at Mount Vernon, and that's the Potomac River. And right out there is where Washington and his crew would harvest the herring that would make a run up the Potomac River. And like I said, he would get about 1.5 million of them a year and sell them to the British. So he was able to harvest and make a lot of money off of that. But how about this view? How about the view of Washington in his day? He had it made. He worked hard for his money though. Alright folks, this is the kitchen area of Mount Vernon. And the kitchen area is outside of the main house. One of the reasons why they have the kitchen area outside of the house is because it's so hot. It gets up to 130 degrees in here. And the other thing that happens is it's a fire hazard. So people generally did not cook inside their original houses. They cooked outside or in another room. I can remember my mom talking about my great-grandfather's house, and it was the same thing. They had a kitchen outside. They had a stew pot outside where they cook. So people were smart. They didn't want to cook inside because it was too hot. All right. Washington had a clerk, otherwise known as an accountant, that would stay here on his property and manage his affairs. I guess he slept upstairs maybe that storage up there. Here's his bed. But he had an accountant that stayed on premises. Pretty smart. Prior to modern technology, the way of preserving foods was to either salt it or to smoke it. And this is the smokehouse. So this is where they would take their hogs that they would slaughter, or their beef, or what have you, and they would smoke it to preserve it. They'd set a fire, it would vent up, and kind of preserve the meat. And there's some up there, not original, of course. Obviously, they did not have a washer or dryer, so what they had was they had a wash house. This is where the laundry was done. They had a couple of slaves that would do that, and they would set out their clothes to dry on those racks right there. And of course they have an iron right there, because they got to have stuff pressed, cleaned and pressed. So they had an iron. They would have something that the iron would sit on to get it hot, and then they would iron. That's why they call it an iron, because it was made of iron. Duh. All right. All right. Here's one of Washington's vehicles. If you got an estate, you got to have a horse, and you got to have a carriage to carry you around. Don't think Martha would have walked around on a horse, so they rode in a carriage, kind of like this. I'm sure this is a reproduction. Hey, little guy. So, yeah, they had a carriage, and that's one of them. Pretty cool. And what's a carriage house without a stable? You got to have a stable for your horses. So this is the stable where the horses stayed. You had 1, 2, 3, 4, about eight stables here for 8 horses. It's pretty nice. Nice and cool in here for the horses. I'm sure they didn't want to get out here in the heat and sweat to death. Pretty interesting. Yo, yo, yo. Okay, well, I just got finished visiting Mount Vernon, which was the home of Washington, and his estate, and his grist mill, and his distillery. And let me give you some thoughts about George Washington. I think he was probably one of the greatest Americans that's ever lived. He was quite accomplished, even though he came from a poor family. And he started out, he wasn't rich, and he just pulled himself up by his bootstraps, and he thought about things, and he made things happen. For instance, he was in the Continental Army, and after he lost a battle, he resigned his commission and then joined up with the British. And that was before the Revolution, of course. And then he got hacked off at the British, and he resigned his commission there, and he became the commander-in-chief, the commander of the American Army. And all this time, he was a farmer. He was growing crops and making money, and he continued doing that all through his life. And even through his military service, and even through his presidency and all that good stuff, he was still making money. He was a farmer. And he had his estate. His estate was like 8,000 acres, and he farmed 3,200 of them. That's like 12 square miles of farm. And that's what he did. And he found out that to grow tobacco wasn't going to make him any money, so he switched to wheat and corn. And when he did that, he started up a grist mill so he could grind the wheat and grind the corn, and he sold that over to the British. And he made a ton of money doing that. And somebody convinced him that they had all the stuff there to make a whiskey plant, a distillery. So they did that, and he made a ton of money doing that. And this was after he was president, of course, but still, I mean, he made a ton of money, and he was making a lot of money when he was president. But through all of it, I mean, Washington, he was smart. I mean, he's the guy that started crop rotation. where he figured out that if you let the land rest for a couple of years, that you could come back to it and get more out of it. So he would rotate his crops. He would also do the thing called nitrogen fixing, which is when you plant peas or beans or legumes or something like that into the ground after you've had a planting, and it'll put nitrogen back into the soil, because they do that. And what else did he do? He did all the stuff about animal husbandry, and he was raising superior sheep. And the grist mill that he did, that was awesome, because they had the best flour and wheat flour and cornmeal in the United States. And then all the leftovers from the distillery, all because after you make it, you've got this waste. He fed that to his cows and pigs, and they ate good. So he was using that to feed his livestock. I mean, the man was he was smart. He didn't waste his time, kind of like somebody traveling on a motorcycle with a donk. But he was smart, but he was also badass. Washington was a natural leader, and what happened was during the Revolution, you guys probably don't even know this, the Redcoats were trying to recruit the Indians to fight for them. So the Indians did that a little bit. Washington found out about it, and he sent the troops in there to wipe them out, and they did. And the Indians, when they finally were working out a treaty with Washington, they were scared to death of him, because they called him the white man with white hair with the long sword, because he was badass. And when he was president, the United States was so poor, the government itself was so poor, that they started taxing liquor. And of course, the small-time distillers, they were going to be broke if they had to pay this tax. So they mounted a rebellion. It's called the Whiskey Rebellion. And Washington sent in the troops. He sent in 12,000 troops because they were rioting. And that's the only time I think of that the United States government itself and armed military men have gone in there and held down a crowd. So he was badass. He didn't take any crap. The people that deserted at him when they were in Valley Forge, he took the guys. They were officers that were leaving their units. They were deserting officers. So he found them. He rounded them up, and their own men had to shoot them. Own men. Can you imagine shooting your commanding officer because he deserted? He was badass. So I think overall, Washington was a great man. He was a hard man. He was a fair man, but he was a hard man. And that's what we need. We need leaders like that. Make tough decisions. So, that was Mount Vernon, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's $20 to get in, and it's $20 well worth it. So if you're ever in Washington, D.C., in the D.C. area, go see it. It's cool. It's cool. So, okay, that'll do it. On to the next place. So we'll see you. DonknDave out. Well, I'm just crossing the bridge over the Potomac, and over there is Washington, D.C., and I don't know if you can see it or not, but there's the Capitol building, and there's a Washington Monument over there. You think if I showed up with Donk that Trump would let me visit with him? I don't think so. He'd probably laugh at me and call me a fool or a goofball or some other vicious thing. That's all right. Trump is Trump. Let him be Trump. Hey, we can go to the carnival over there. That'd be all right. Traffic. Washington, D.C. traffic. It is unfreaking believable. Atlanta traffic was bad too. Chicago traffic. Oh, man, I don't know which is worse. Chicago, Atlanta, or DC. It's just horrible. Horrible, horrible, horrible. Alright. Later. Good Lord. Look at this. This is the traffic jam for people trying to get on the Bay Bridge in Maryland from Annapolis to like the mainland, or no, the Outer Bank area of Maryland. Oh my God, look at this traffic. It's been like this for an hour. An hour. Stop and go, go and stop. Good Lord. And it's hot. Again, it's hot. It'd be so much better to be out of this and on a nice country road. It's nice and cool. But that's not gonna happen today. Oh man, and people are rude here. People honking all the time. Ugh. Giving the finger. Ugh. Oh well. As they say, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. So I haven't given my fair share of the fingers yet, but that might be coming. All right, later. All right, well, since we missed it yesterday because my audio sucked, thought I'd try this again. I had a dream last night, or actually it was 2 nights ago, now that I remember. I had a dream 2 nights ago, and it's from something that happened like 20 years ago, 18 years ago. And it wasn't realistic at all. The dream was not realistic. It's just nothing. It's stupid. But for some reason, my subconscious dreamed up this dream. And it was stupid. And it was kind of like a toilet backing up, full of crap. You know, you shouldn't let your past crap on your future or your present. So I've struggled for about a couple of years really just to get shit together in life, be happy, you know, and I'm finally there. And I'm confident too. That's the other thing. Don't think that I'm a wimpy or anything like that. I'm confident as hell about things. And I've got a guru guy that was online that helped me out a lot. So if you want that information, I'll give it to you, but privately, so you'll have to send me a notice or something like that. But the thing is, just don't let crap from your past get in your life and try to mess you up. Don't let that get into your head. Deal with what you got today. Plan for the future. Know your future. Be your future. That's from Caddyshack, if you don't remember. Chevy Chase. But it's true, you know? Get your life together. Plan your future. Know your future. Be your future. That's the way it ought to be.
Yeah.